it's proof positive that this Telegram channel is 100% out of control.
Less they're doing that.
But well, thank you very much. If I hope they're watching, but maybe not. Maybe they're out doing something more constructive. But thank you very much.
I got a window into their world like I never had before. They watch on YouTube, and they simultaneously are chatting over on Telegram. They got a whole routine going on.
Good Lord, it's out of control.
And I've been blamed for introducing the alcohol to the whole thing, and they say that's why they get out.
Yeah. No, Jeff, I blame you, because before that, this was literally a sober society of people who were worried about geopolitics, Russian-American relations. We were having intellectual conversations, and then you introduced alcohol. Friday nights went out of control, and now, believe it or not, Mondays are out of control. Tuesdays are out of control. The entire week's out of control. This Telegram channel must be terminated with extreme prejudice. But I thank them for that. I thank them for the holiday wishes.
I don't know if you want, you got like at least 3 different worlds, maybe more than that going on. And so because it's the holiday season, we all start feeling very sentimental and all that, and so now I'm developing a relationship with these people. Is that okay? Or do you want these worlds of yours to be siloed off and kept separate? Or
no, Jeff. My world is your world. Mi casa, su casa, my friend. Plus, you helped create this nightmare. You're going to have to deal with it, okay? You are literally the brute squad, from the Princess Bride. You're the brute squad that's got to come in and fix this problem that you started with your alcohol-infused merriment.
Remember Bella from Boston? Look at that message from Bella in Boston. You remember her, right?
Oh, yeah. Hi, Bella.
Tori told me about her. Thank you, Bella. How's the cough?
Oh, it's all gone, man. You won't hear me cough at all tonight.
Okay, whatever you say.
If I do it, I'm just looking for cheap sympathy, okay? Or if somebody asks me a tough question that I can't answer, I'll come up with a real big coughing spell. All right, but hey, I just want to point out, I'm in the holiday spirit.
Look at that.
So I'm trying my best. Plus, in honor of Ukraine's president, I'm wearing Zelensky green.
Yeah, I saw him. Let's take a look at your latest work. He as is his custom, he showed up in Washington dressed casually. You wrote an article for Sputnik about his visit, and you also did one of your 2-minute videos.
You got to get a better freeze. Why do you pick that picture to freeze? Okay, literally, that's better.
That's
because
better,
the other one. But good God, you have to
that's another 2-minute topic. With the mouth open, that always looks good.
Mouth open, big belly.
And hey, compared to Henry Kissinger, you look great.
I'm doing all right.
Yeah, but that's a high jump over a low hurdle. Okay, so that's the latest actually today. You can read it all on ScottRitterExtra.com. This was written for our Substack. The others, we link to it, so you can get to everything there. All right, should we get straight to the questions since it's the holiday? I mean, we can bitch about Henry Kissinger or Zelensky if you want first. It's up to you.
I'm sure some of the questions will probably see, you gave me a difficult choice and I had to go to coughing. I think some of the questions will probably touch upon these topics. But before we start, I just want to say thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Tori. Thank you, everybody who watches, who's been a part of this. Thanks our angels, in Toronto and elsewhere. Thanks to the unicorns, Montreal. I mean, I said elsewhere too. I mean, there could be an angel in Montreal. It could be one in Toronto. They're everywhere. But unicorns, the artificial intelligence that resides in Moscow, and of course some fake arm wrestling fanatic in Texas, and all the others who make the Telegram channel what it is, which is not just a place for people to exchange ideas about difficult topics, but it's become a community. And I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who supports this channel and any other things that we do. It's been a heck of a year, and I think next year is going to be even more productive as we start to expand our reach, so to speak. I know, Jeff, you've been working overtime to come up with some opportunities, and I like the one you sent me about California. I think that's a cool deal. So let's do this thing. Let's celebrate the end of the year. We'll have a nice loquacious chat. I'll do my best to keep my cool, and let's end this year on a nice note, and let's move in with a positive spirit about what's going to happen next year. It's going to be difficult times. I don't think the world's going to get any easier, but if we can help people wrestle through these difficult topics with a little bit of sense of humor and an alternative approach, then I think we're accomplishing something.
All right. Well, that's very well said. But don't worry. I think Santa has heard the F word before. At least one of his reindeers foul-mouthed, I heard. So
that's Rudolph. That
I wasn't going to mention it. I wasn't going to mention it. Also, I would like to dedicate this podcast to the angel in Quebec. We just got some bad news right before we started. He's in the hospital. He, as some of the folks on Telegram know, he injured himself playing hockey. I don't know how long ago, maybe it was a week or so ago, and he has all kinds of complications. So he had to go to the emergency room, and hopefully he'll be okay. But sounds kind of serious, so we'll be thinking of him. Yeah. So cheers to Ricardo, Richie, our angel in Quebec, and wish you a speedy recovery. We'll try to keep our good cheer despite your bad fortune. It won't be easy, but we'll do our best. And thanks so much. And to those of you who don't know, the reason our technical situation has improved drastically is because of that.
Because of Ricardo, yeah. I'm staring at a camera on a computer. So if you like all those people who harassed us about the audio quality and the image quality, geez, it looks like we fixed it, but that wouldn't have happened without Ricardo's help. So yeah.
Right. So send him flowers at every emergency room in Canada until we figure
until you find the right one.
Yeah. Right. All right, Bella. Thank you. You're sweet. All right, let's get to the questions. Zoran Podgorsak from Zagreb, Croatia. What if Biden turns illegal immigrants into soldiers, offering American citizenship for joining the army? What if? I thought that was already a given. What do I know? There must be a reason for allowing immigration on such a large scale, and this way Biden gets 10 millions of soldiers. I don't know where that number came from. That seems a bit high, but anyway, what do you want to say about that, Scott?
Well, I mean, there are already programs in place for immigrants to get citizenship. I don't know. I would imagine you can't enlist in the army if you're an illegal immigrant, but I don't know. But I do know there's a program for immigrants to join the military, serve in the military, and if they, are discharged honorably, they sort of get a fast track for citizenship, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it allows people to say, I want to be part of this society and to step up and do something for the society. I know there's people out there that don't believe joining the military helps society. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But the gesture of saying, I'm willing to put on the uniform and be ready to respond in case my nation that I want to become a citizen of needs me, that's honorable stuff. So I'm not in disfavor of it. I would imagine that there's limits to the program. So the idea that you're going to flood the U.S. military with 10 million, refugees, legal or otherwise, I don't know. Maybe people read history and realize what happened to the Roman Empire when they diluted the legions with a bunch of, Goths and Visigoths and Huns and, Franks and everybody else who didn't like the Roman Empire. So, but the reason why we have an out of control border, I mean, we got to sort of be honest about this, is because Americans don't like to pick lettuce. Americans don't like to pick broccoli. Americans don't like to pick carrots. We don't like to do something where you have to bend over and hurt your back. We don't like to get up early in the morning, work, very lengthy hours in a field under the blazing sun. We'd rather the little brown people from Mexico do it. And so for decades now, we've been letting Mexicans in. And they've been performing this brutal manual labor. and we turned a blind eye to it. And yet now,
is that much of a factor, though, Scott? I mean, think about the number of people coming in and the number of farmers that there are. I don't. I
well,
don't
it's
know
not. It started with farming, Jeff. You can't deny it. We know it started with farming.
There's other types of manual labor.
But now, look, I'll go down to Poughkeepsie right now, and I'll tell you, I know exactly where to go to watch all the Mexicans from
Oaxaca.
Line up for the menial jobs. What do you think? The roofers? You ever take a look at a roofing crew? They don't speak English. They speak Spanish. Why? Because they're from Mexico. It's brutal labor, and roofing crews come around with a few foremen, a few guys who have the technical skills, and they go up and they say, you, get in the truck, and they pay them dirt wages, and that happens. All the landscaping, all the brutal labor.
I live in LA County, so yeah.
Well, I'm telling you that New York is a horrible place for this. My point is, in America, we allow this to happen, and then we complain that they come across the border. It's insane.
Right. Well, insane. I think another reason, at least a theory that's been said, is the immigrants will tend to vote for the people who allowed them to come into the country.
Yeah, but that fell apart. I mean, again, I'm not here to sing Donald Trump's praises, but I'm telling you what, Don the man was changing the demographics of the American electorate. If people were watching, even though he lost the 2020 election, or did he? I don't want to start that controversy, but oops. But the fact of the matter is, he was transforming the demographics where Latinos were voting for him in increased numbers, black males, black women, everybody except apparently white men, even white women increased. Why?
Well,
because
also
the economic promise that his policies.
Latinos who got in here the legal way, the hard way. I don't know that all of them would be so eager to applaud people coming in the easy way. They may not like it. I don't know I don't think I'd like it if I came in the hard way and somebody else came in.
The immigrant community is split on that. I mean, there's a big divide between the people who did it the right way, and they're like, you're ruining it for everybody who wants to do it the right way. But again, I am an arm wrestling fanatic, and Jeff finally has some real wine. I'm thinking Ryan Milton is actually. He's computer generated. He posts these ridiculous pictures of his chiseled body, like he found out how to do Spartan racing. So next thing I know, he's posting pictures of his perfect chiseled body going over Spartan obstacles, and he's like, he's trying to humiliate me. It doesn't work, Ryan. I know your secret. I'm just going to unplug your computer, and you're going to go away, you little hologram.
He could be a 16-year-old scrawny little punk. Who knows?
A little punk in the basement, his mom's basement, using his sister's computer. Way to go, Ryan. No, actually, he's going to kick my ass because I've seen him lift weights, and it's pretty impressive.
All right. Oksana from Odessa. This is the 1S version of Odessa, Ukraine. Are you a 1S or a 2S man, Scott?
Wow, that's a personal question, Jeff.
All right. Well, I'm sorry.
I'm Odessa with 2 S's. I think that's the way it's supposed to be spelled, but who knows?
No, it's both ways. It's both ways.
Really?
Since Russians fled from Kherson, there's not many military movements in Odessa region and no Russian possibilities of an offensive. Therefore, how come? Why do they keep attacking infrastructure there? There's no point to it. Is it just for people suffering? Are they any different from the Nazis they claim are fighting against them?
Well, they are different from the Nazis they claim are fighting against because Russia's destroying the infrastructure in Odessa and the Nazis aren't. I'm sorry, Oksana. I mean, my heart breaks for you. You're in a very difficult situation. You didn't ask for this fight, I don't believe. It's a fight that shouldn't have been thrust upon you, but you're in the middle of it. Back in 1990, the Security Council of the United Nations authorized the United States to take the lead in organizing an international coalition to evict Iraq from Kuwait. They passed a Chapter 7 resolution authorizing the use of military force to do that, to evict Iraq from Kuwait. The United States, in an effort to achieve this objective, initiated what's called a strategic air campaign, where we systematically destroyed 96% of all of Iraq's infrastructure. And people have to say, well, what does bombing Mosul have to do with liberating Kuwait? Everything, you see, because it's all about destroying a nation's ability to resist. And whether you like it or not, Odessa is part of Ukraine. And therefore, Russia is not going to allow a little island of luxury to exist. Russia is going to make all of Ukraine suffer for the sins of Zelensky, for the sins of Ukraine, by the way. Come on, Oksana, you live in Odessa. You do know what happened in Odessa in 2014, do you not? Are you not aware that the brutal right-wing Nazi thugs that you sort of mockingly refer to here actually came down from Kharkiv, from Lvov, from Kiev, and carried riots in the streets where they stuffed 150 ethnic Russians into a trade building, set it on fire, causing 48 of them to die? You're aware of that, right, Oksana? You know that happened, don't you? So don't give me any of this holier than thou. You're just like the Nazis. No, you're the Nazi. You're the ones who burned the Russians to death. You're the ones who then launched a brutal assault against Mariupol, against the Donbass, threatening cultural and ethnic genocide against the ethnic Russians. And Russia tried to find a diplomatic solution. Don't pretend they didn't. It's your president, Poroshenko. Don't point the finger at Russia. Poroshenko, who said the Minsk Accords was a sham. Do you support that, Oksana? Do you support the fact that your president lied, that diplomacy was a joke, that your president misrepresented Ukraine to the United Nations Security Council, who passed a resolution promoting the implementation of Minsk, that your government, your country, your people, you didn't implement? Or do you support Angela Merkel also telling a lie? You know, you led the Russians by the nose into believing there was a diplomatic solution. All the while, you were using the time bought by the Minsk Accords to build up a NATO-trained army. Did you complain when your country allowed the United States to set up a military training facility in Western Ukraine to train 1 battalion Ukrainian troops every 55 days to go east to kill ethnic Russians? Did you complain, Oksana? The answer is no, you did not. All right, so don't cry now that you're paying the price, because you are going to pay the price. And here's a pro tip, Oksana. They're coming for you. They're going to take Odessa. Odessa will be Russian again, whether you want it or not, because that's just the way the cookie crumbles. You're on the wrong side of history. You picked a fight with the wrong country. You lied to them. You threatened them. I mean, were you supporting when they burned the Russian books? Do you support the suppression of Russian culture? Are you applauding as your SBU, Secret Services, break into Russian Orthodox churches and shut them down, denying old women the right to bury their sons? No, Oksana, you don't get any sympathy from me. None whatsoever. You reap the wind, you sow the whirlwind. It's coming for you, baby. Strap up.
All right, Scott. Well, obviously you forgot that she was talking about a different Odessa, the one with one S. You're ranting about the one with 2 S's. Okay. So well, as Emily Vitella used to say on Saturday Night Live, never mind.
Merry Christmas.
Ewall.
Don't make fun of me. Eeyore.
From Glasgow, Scotland. If Russia were to change tactics and launch a normal bombing campaign using their strategic bombers, would they be able to do so safely, or would Ukrainian air defenses be able to reach them even at a high altitude?
I guess by normal bombing campaign, he means having the bombers fly directly over the target. That would be stupid. Because, yes, Ukrainian missiles would be able to reach up and shoot them down. This is sort of the thing that we did in Vietnam, if people remember the 1972 Christmas bombing campaign, where we sent waves of B-52 bombers over Hanoi and Haiphong, dropping bombs. We lost a lot of bombers because they were firing SA-2 missiles up and they were shooting us down. You don't need to do that. Why does Russia have to play their game? Normal bombing campaign, Russia's running a normal bombing campaign, and one that's working, by the way. It's eviscerating the Ukrainian infrastructure. It's hitting every target they aim at. They haven't missed one yet. And they do that by having their bombers stand off and fire long-range missiles. It's called being smart, fighting smart, not fighting stupid. I don't know, maybe some people like, people in the audience will sit back and get some sort of visceral thrill out of watching Russians carpet bomb Kiev. A, it's very ineffective. B, it's very inhumane. C, it might be a violation of law of war. And D, it's just stupid militarily. Why risk a bomber flying directly over Kiev that might fail to accomplish the task when it can stand off and fire these precision-guided missiles that'll come in and hit every single thing they're aiming at? The Russians are doing it right. They're doing it smart. There's no need to put bombers over Kiev.
Okay. Scott mentioned earlier that I've been working on some events around the country. One of the things that looks like a good possibility is in Dallas at a venue called Old Hag's Pizza. And we have a voicemail message from the manager of that establishment. He has a question for you.
Good evening, Jeff. Good evening, Mr. Ritter.
Whoa, hold on. Why are you Mr. Ritter and I'm Jeff? Why don't I get?
I think they know who the authority is here, Jeff. I'm so sorry to say. You wear a weird hat. You have balding hair. You have a scraggly mustache, and you drink wine. This is Texas we're talking about.
I'm not bald. I have a slightly receding hairline.
This is Texas we're talking about, Jeff. If you want Texas attention, you better drink beer.
You don't even like being called Mr. Ritter. All right.
No, I don't, but that's okay.
All right, I'll let it go this time, sir.
Good evening, Jeff. Good evening, Mr. Ritter. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys here in Dallas shortly. My question tonight is, are we witnessing the U.S., the West, Ukraine deploy the tactic of escalate to de-escalate, with allowing Ukraine to strike at Russian strategic nuclear forces upon the homeland of Russia? And what could Russia's potential responses be to this? And do you think that we will see further attacks in the future?
Good question. Well, first of all, let's just start off with the let's frame it properly, the intent of the question, because it's a serious question about a serious issue. Russia's nuclear doctrine allows for Russia to respond nuclearly in a nuclear fashion. I don't know if nuclearly is a word, but in a nuclear fashion. It is now. I just invented it. It's the beauty of the American language is that you can invent words, and if enough people adopt them, Webster puts them in their dictionary, and ta-da, it's official. So everybody, nuclearly, that's a new word.
Started here tonight.
Right now. But get back to serious. If somebody launches an attack designed to destroy Russia's nuclear deterrence capability, their nuclear strike force, then Russia it believes that it has a right to respond using nuclear weapons to eliminate that threat. So the idea would be that if the United States launched a massive cruise missile attack against these airfields designed through its intent to destroy the totality of Russia's nuclear strike capability, then Russia could respond. Now, what Ukraine did was take these Tupolev 141, I believe is the designation, aerial target drones. These are basically jet-powered unmanned aircraft that take off and then they fly in a given pattern, and the air defense people are supposed to track them on radars and then fire missiles to shoot them down. They're not guided missiles. They weren't built for that. They don't have terminal guidance built in. So the Ukrainians modified these to have a warhead, an explosive warhead, and have some sort of guidance capability that they drinking my Bourjuma. Yes, I am. Thank you, Don and Elena. I actually drink it. I love Bourjuma. It's good for the stomach. But to get back to the subject, they modified these things and they launched them against the Engels airfield and another airfield, Ryazan or something of that nature, where the Russian strategic bomber force is located. 3 Russian bombers were damaged significantly, taken out of service for this. So people are worried because they say that sort of fits the definition of one of these conditions under which Russia could theoretically escalate to nuclear retaliation. The Russians are mature. They know exactly what happened. What I mean by that is they know that Ukraine is desperate right now, and Ukraine is resorting to desperate measures to convert an old Soviet era, aerial target drone into a surface-to-surface missile is a act of desperation. It's not a concerted effort by a superpower to try and nullify the totality of the Russian nuclear bomber force. So Russia isn't going to overreact. The Russians, how did they respond? They mitigated the damage done, and that very day they took the rest of their bombers off with their air-to-ground missiles, and they fired them, and they destroyed the Ukrainian infrastructure. Is Ukraine going to attempt to do the same thing in the future? Probably. I would if I were the Ukrainians, and I would say, You made a choice to strike us using bombers that were operating in conventional mode from Ingalls Air Base. That makes that a legitimate target of war. Pound sand, Russia. You want to play big boy games? You pay big boy prices, and Russia accepts that. Russia's saying you're absolutely right. We're bombing you from this base. You're attacking it. It's incumbent upon us to prevent this from happening. It's not a threat to Russia's nuclear doctrine. So I don't see this fitting into some sort of grand chess game where somebody's trying to, escalate against the Russian bomber force to get Russia to de-escalate. Actually, the exact opposite has happened. They attacked it, and Russia has escalated the aerial campaign.
A Master from Washington. What is the significance behind Putin terming his operation a strategic military operation as opposed to declaring war on Ukraine? Could a declaration of war be possible if another provocative attack by Ukraine deep inside Russian territory were to happen? What might that entail?
Well, now we're getting into legal issues that probably people who spend a lot of money to go to law school are better equipped, but I'll do my best on this one. The Russians operate in accordance with international law. They're very sticklers for it. They don't like to deviate, unlike other nations I know that might just totally disregard international law and say invade Iraq on a falsified case. The Russian justification for going into Ukraine was premised on Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, a case that's derived from a precedent set by NATO in striking Serbia in 1999, that of preemptive collective self-defense. Lugansk and Donetsk declared themselves to be independent. Russia recognized this independence. Russia then entered into a collective security agreement with these two entities. And then they made the determination that given the posturing of Ukraine, the expansion of NATO, the fact that the NATO was building a Ukrainian army for the sole purpose of attacking Russia, and that army was assembling in eastern Ukraine, that the Ukrainians had upped their physical attacks on the Donbass region by an order of magnitude in the days and weeks leading up to this invasion. Russia deemed the Ukrainian threat to be imminent in nature, and therefore Russia, under the Caroline Doctrine, said we can attack, and they did. Totally legal. Why didn't they declare war? Because to declare war, you have to have justification. You tend to have to be attacked. This was a special military operation. Russia didn't mobilize its troops. Russia didn't seek to disrupt its economy. And this is an important part. Remember, at the same time this was happening, the United States said they were going to instigate or institute or put in motion the most stringent economic sanctions program in the history of economic sanctions, designed to destroy the Russian economy. So the last thing Russia would want to do is declare war and go to a wartime economy at the moment of radical transformation away from this Western-leaning economy, pivoting now to the East. So Russia needs to make sure that it doesn't disrupt this transition. And one of the best ways to disrupt this transition would be to declare war and go on a wartime footing. Not a good idea. So Russia wanted to keep things normal. And we hear reference to that today. Vladimir Putin just gave a speech the other day where he spoke about this isn't about guns and butter. If you remember, that's an old term where during World War II, people gave up the ability to live a comfortable life, the butter, so that they can produce the guns necessary for war. Putin's saying, no, we are capable of, walking and chewing gum at the same time. We can expand our military industrial capacity without disrupting the civilian economy. But that's all part of the mindset that went into the special military operation. So economically, militarily, Russia made a decision that they were going to make do with the forces that were available in the peacetime Russian military, that they weren't going to mobilize. Because remember, everything has to be done legally. To increase the number of troops, you would require some sort of parliamentarian action that would be linked to a declaration of war. Russia didn't want that. They wanted to keep things as normal as possible. And the last thing, and perhaps the most important part of this, is that Russia didn't want to go to war against Ukraine. People just don't understand. They mock it. I hear all these Russophobes out there now. They say, Vladimir Putin's the new Stalin. All he wants to do is kill Ukrainians, wants to slaughter Ukrainians, the new Holodomor, on and on and on. No. Actually, the Russians view the Ukrainians as brothers. They view them as, part of the same family. the Russian nation, so to speak, people with shared languages, shared culture, shared religion, shared history. The last thing they want to do is to go to war against Ukraine. I think bombing the Ukrainian cities the way they are right now causes physical pain for the Russians doing it. I mean, at some point in time, they're going to get hardened. There's an old saying that the Russians are slow to harness. And what that means is, it's tough to get the yoke around them and get them focused on the mission. But once you get the yoke around the Russian bear and the Russian bear starts moving, you ain't going to stop it. And unfortunately for Ukraine and the West, the bear's been harnessed. The bear has the yoke. The bear's moving. The bear's going to get the job done. But it doesn't mean the bear likes it. The Russians didn't want to do this war the way it's happening. They were hoping for a different outcome. That hope might have been naive. That hope might have been based upon bad intelligence. We don't know. Someday the book will be written about that when all the information comes clear. But what is certain is that Russia didn't want to start this conflict by going to war against Ukraine, because that's the last thing they want. At some point in time, this conflict will end, and the Russians want to live with the Ukrainians peacefully, coexist with them. It's going to be very difficult to do now that certain lines have been crossed, especially with the people of Western Ukraine who have embraced the odious ideology of Stepan Bandera. But, this wasn't meant to be a war. It is a war now, but it's not a war against Russia and Ukraine. Understand that. This is a war between Russia and the collective West, who has opted to use Ukraine as a proxy. And I think that one of the most disturbing aspects of this is what just happened in Washington, D.C. with Zelensky's visit. Zelensky came here believing that the United States is serious about helping Ukraine. He believed it so much that when he had the opportunity to speak with the president, speak with Congress, he had the audacity to say, I need more weapons to win. You guys want me to win? You want Ukraine to win this war? Then you have to give me the weapons to do this. I need, and according to his General Zaluzhny, 300 modern tanks. I need 500 modern infantry fighting vehicles. I need 500 more modern artillery shells with an endless supply of ammunition. This is what I need to do what you say you want me to do, which is to win on the battlefield. And what did Biden say? No. And what does that mean? That we don't want him to win. And this is a clear statement of fact there is. The United States is not trying to get Ukraine to win. The United States is trying to implement what Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, has talked about. Let Ukraine fight to the last Ukrainian. Let them all die. We don't care. As long as they cause Russia harm, they cause Russia pain. This is about bringing the pain down on Russia. And America doesn't care that it's going to cost Ukraine their nation. It's going to cost them hundreds of thousands of lives. It's going to be, a total catastrophe. We don't care. We don't care. Biden just made that clear. We're willing to spend all the money necessary to keep the Ukrainians in the field, not to win, but to kill as many Russians before they all die.
One of the commenters said that Putin referred to it as a war the other day. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if you're aware of it, Scott, if it is true. But I would assume that we can't really jump to any conclusions unless we know, well, what language did he say it in? Who did the translating? What was the context? So,
well, first of all, war is a word.
Formal declaration,
No, war is a word. It's a warlike situation where we're waging a war, a conflict. But there's been no formal declaration of war. The legal framework that defines what Russia's doing in Ukraine continues to be the presidential directives, which call it a special military operation. It's still referred to as a special military operation, and the Russian legal system operates as if it's a special military operation. There's been no declaration of war, so people should.
And the media uses the same kind of words interchangeably. Sometimes they call it a special military operation. Sometimes they call it a war. Conan the Cat from New Zealand. Does restraint by Russia to provocation from NATO, like drone strikes inside Russian borders, make nuclear war more or less likely? Conversely, would a rapid, decisive move by Moscow widen that window or help close it? Which course is Moscow likely to take?
In every conversation I've had with Russian figures, either military figures, academics, whatever, but people of note, serious people, they all mention the same thing. The absolute desire on the part of Vladimir Putin and the Russian leadership to manage escalation, risk management. Russia doesn't want to create any opportunities for this conflict to spin out of control. The last thing Russia wants is a direct conflict with NATO, because that inevitably leads to the great potential of a nuclear strike, a nuclear exchange that will be the end of the world. So Russia doesn't overreact to these provocations. Does it mean that these provocations are likely to continue? Absolutely. Is it embarrassing for Russia every time a Ukrainian shell lands on a Russian town, village, or city? Yes. But you know what? That town, village, and city and the population will be here next week. Why? Because Russia didn't overreact. See, Russian overreaction could lead to a NATO response that could lead to a conflict between Russia and NATO that leads to a nuclear war. So everybody's like, well, Russia's embarrassing themselves. Well, yeah, but you know what? Russia's still alive, and so are you. So I think that the Russians know what they're doing. I think they understand the big picture, and the big picture is we don't get to the end game here if we go to nuclear war. So we're going to manage escalation. So even when the opponent does something that is escalatory in fashion, like launching drone strikes inside Russia, we being Russia, is not going to overreact, that we're going to keep our eye on the ball, understand what the big picture is. And the big picture is that 300,000 men were mobilized. 150,000 of them are currently on the ground in the Special Military Operations Zone of Operations, stabilizing the defensive lines, while the remaining 150,000 are finalizing their training, getting ready to fall in on the hundreds and thousands of modern military equipment pieces, the best tanks, best artillery, best infantry fighting vehicles out there, to form 10 to 15 division equivalents, which will be unleashed like the hounds of war on the Ukrainians. That's the big picture. So Russia's not going to throw all that away simply because they got their feelings hurt because the Ukrainians fired a drone-based, ordnance into Russia proper. No, that's silly on the part of Russia. That's the sign of an immature. I mean, it reminds me, you want to speak of immaturity, look at the response of Poland and NATO when the Ukrainian S-300 missile landed on Polish soil, killing 2 farmers. It wasn't measured. It wasn't responsible. It was panic. Oh my God, Article 5, Article 4, we must mobilize, we must punish, we must sanction. You don't see Russia do any of that. Russia takes everything calmly, cool, measured. They're the only adults in the room.
Artem from Ulanovsk, I may have butchered that, Russia. What can you say? You mentioned him earlier, actually, when you were making a comparison, so this is quite timely. What can you say about Joseph Stalin as a ruler? If you compare Stalin and Putin, who do you think is the best ruler for Russia?
Well, first of all, we need to understand that when we speak of Stalin, he wasn't a Russian leader, he was a Soviet leader. So we really can't compare and contrast Soviet and Russia, two totally different historical paradigms. Stalin was a product of the times. Russia was before Russia became the Soviet Union, the Russian Empire was ruled by the czars, and Russia was undergoing significant, societal changes. People who study Russian history understand, for instance, that the 1905 revolution, was indicative of the turmoil that existed in Russia, the disparity between the peasants, the working class, and the elite, that manifested itself in a bunch of societal strains that led to the empowerment of revolutionary forces, especially once World War I kicked in. And as Russia started to lose on the front line and society started to question the viability of the czars. So there was a revolution, and Stalin was part of this revolution. Revolutions are not easy. They're not bloodless. They're not innocent. One only has to take a look at the American Revolution to understand that, the truth of it, not the glory, glory, hallelujah that we spread about this, but what we really did against the Tory population, how we treated them during the conflict and after the conflict. It was bloody, it was brutal, and that was the fact of the Russian Revolution. It wasn't meant to be painless. It was meant to be actually painful. Vladimir Lenin, talked about the necessity of losing up to 14 million peasants in order to convert Russian society or Soviet society from the agrarian base of the Tsarist times into a modern industrial thing. Now, he later backed down with something called the New Economic Policy because he realized that his initial program didn't work. But Lenin's vacillations caused a lot of problems for Russia. In fact, much of the, we talked about the Holodomor and the tragedy of 1932, 1933, but a lot of people don't talk about what happened from 1920, 1921 when they had another great famine. And one of the problems of these famines is that they're cyclical. They represent, inefficiencies in the system so that the system can't absorb a bad drought. Because of the way that they approached farming, the two-crop methodology, which was inefficient, used a lot of labor, got little product. Stalin, as the leader who replaced Lenin, brutally, by the way, replaced by going in and purging any potential, people who were potentially opposed to him, Trotsky, Bukharin, and others. Stalin became the leader. Now, remember the times that he's in, post-revolution, post-Civil War. And the Civil War was brutal. And the Civil War wasn't just a civil war between Russians. The Civil War involved American and British forces landing in Murmansk and Archangels, Americans leading Japanese forces and British forces coming in through Vladivostok, the British coming up through the Caspian Sea, the French, everybody moving in, surrounding the Soviet Union, this war against Bolshevism. It was more than a civil war. It was a global war against the Soviet Union. And the mindset that creates is that Russians, the Soviets, have to do something to bring their nation up from the wreckage that existed after the World War I, after the revolution, and after the Civil War. To get them able to survive required a strong leader, a man of steel, literally, Stalin. And he did things that we in the West today might say, wow, that sounds a little brutal. Well, you know what? I challenge any one of you guys who criticize Stalin to go back in time and take over and tell me how you do it differently. Let me tell you what would happen. The Soviet system would eat you alive because it preyed on the weak. It preyed on the innocent. It preyed on the people who had a soft spot in their heart. They needed a hard person to make hard decisions to get the Soviet Union into the modern world. And ask yourself why the Soviet Union survived the German invasion in 1941. The answer is because Stalin sought to industrialize the nation, because Stalin did collective farming. Stalin did everything that was necessary for the Soviet Union to have the capacity to lose a third or a fourth of its land mass, including all of its critical industrial centers. He was able to move them over to the Ural Mountains, put them in place, and get them cranking stuff out again so they could beat the Nazis. Only Stalin could have accomplished this. So that's what I think of Stalin. I think he was a man of his times who operated in a very cruel world where any sign of weakness would not only have meant his demise, but the demise of the nation, of the Soviet nation, which means Russia and everything else that's attached. We do know that he was Georgian, but he was a Soviet leader. But now we come to Putin. Putin wasn't a Soviet leader. Putin is a Russian president. But again, let's talk about Putin in his times. When the Soviet Union collapsed, what emerged from it, from the wreckage of this collapse, were a bunch of former Soviet republics, the largest of which was the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation fell under the grip of Western powers who were exploiting it economically and seeking to dominate it politically by taking control of a very corrupt, drunk, inept man named Boris Yeltsin and imposing their will on Russia. When Putin came in and assumed the presidency in 1999, he made a decision that wasn't going to be the future of Russia. He said Russia will stand on its own feet. Russia will look out for Russian interests. And he made some hard decisions. But these decisions weren't as hard as the ones Stalin made. Putin didn't act brutally. Putin tried to work democratically. Putin, worked with the oligarchs to the extent that he could. He worked within the Russian system to the extent that he could, where he could work constructively, he did. Where the system was inefficient or obstructing, he overcame that obstruction. He got rid of the Chechen conflict. People criticized that. The brutality of war. Hey, guess what? War is brutal. Here's the other thing. Russia won that war. Russia didn't lose that war. And the reason why Russia won that war is because Vladimir Putin said, we're going to do that which is necessary to prevail in this conflict. Ask any Chechen alive today. Do they prefer to be alive today or back in 1993, 94, 95? all the way up to 2005 when the conflict was raging. To a person, they'll say, we prefer today. Why? They prosper today because they're part of the Russian Federation. They're treated properly, unlike what was happening in the 1990s, early 2000s. Putin solved that problem brutally, but sometimes that's the only way to solve a problem. He solved the economic problem. I challenge anybody to go to Russia and go back in the archives, go to any city, find any city, go to the archives and pull up the photographs of the city, 1999, 2000, and just run it all the way out to 2022. And you're going to see every year it gets better. You know, there's a statement in American politics when you talk about a president, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Well, every Russian can answer honestly, yes, we're better off today than we were in 1990, 1999. We are much better off today. That's because of Vladimir Putin. So who's the best leader for Russia? Vladimir Putin's the best leader for Russia. He saved Russia. Without Vladimir Putin, Russia wouldn't be where it's at today. If Boris Yeltsin had appointed a Yeltsin clone, Russia would probably be broken, dismembered, and ineffective. Continue to be dominated by the West that doesn't care about the Russian people, only cares about Russian resources. Vladimir Putin is the savior of Russia, so he is the best leader of his time. Joseph Stalin is the savior of the Soviet Union. He's the best leader of his time. They're both strong leaders, but they govern in different ways at different times, and you can't make a direct comparison between the two.
All right. Earlier, you were questioning whether or not Ryan in Austin, as opposed to Ryan in Dallas, actually exists, or whether or not he really exists as he describes himself. So look who we have joining us.
How do we know, though? Where's face recognition software? How do I know he's not a Russian using advanced technology to make himself look like a balding, middle-aged? Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Ryan, how you doing?
За здоровье, друзья.
Look at that. He knows Russian, too. Can we see the biceps, Ryan? Let's see if they're
better
real.
than me, by the way. I just got to warn you.
No, right. See, you can't. They're in hiding.
Uh-huh.
But well, I have to take the shirt off to.
No, don't do that. You get in trouble
It's
every time you take your
Christmas.
shirt off.
Take it easy.
I can't. But first of all,
this is a family show, Ryan.
By the way, Ryan, button up your shirt, man. Button up the shirt.
Yeah.
Enough cleavage. Jeez.
So first of all, my favorite Russian word was taught to me by Scott Ritter.
Uh-oh. We got another person.
Yeah.
I thought she was artificial intelligence. Turns out she's a real human being.
Alex, you're in Russia?
Конечно, да.
Yes, of course.
Of course,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, so is what Scott's just said correct, that you're all better off now under Putin? Is it getting better every year? You can
Тут я не
translate,
совсем
Ryan.
поняла, так через одно слово.
Can you translate, Ryan? Do you know Russian?
I think she said she doesn't know the words, but
Here's somebody who can translate.
Good Lord.
Good Lord, what have I done?
Hello, Scott. Good evening.
So
Mr.
to the
Jeff.
YouTube audience,
Wait,
we should
wait,
explain,
yeah.
these are the three of the administrators of Scott's
The
Telegram chat.
channel, yeah.
And they're the ones who are responsible for banning you when you act an audience. So don't blame me. Why are you guys banning everybody all the time? By the way, what's going on? What's
crazy talk. It's all about crazy
Good
talk.
Bastard.
Oh, what?
It's
But
about
the thing is,
crazy
Jeff, you
talk.
see, the problem is that Jeff has introduced alcohol into the mix, and so I'm fairly certain that there's been some Tomsk beer drinking in Moscow. There's some Jägermeister being drunk in Canada, and
It's water.
whiskey, water. Well, thank
Oh.
goodness.
yeah,
water.
sure.
But
Where are you, Ksenia?
Okay, I was kidding. Here.
yeah.
Where are
She's
you,
in
Ksenia?
Canada.
I am in the storm.
Well,
Yeah, I'm in Canada. Yeah.
In Canada. I mean, I need the exact address. I'm coming over. And
Yeah,
Alex,
somewhere
we already
in
talked. And Ryan, you're in Austin.
I'm in Austin. Hell yeah.
Москва.
So for people on YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else who are watching who aren't familiar with the Telegram situation, do you guys just want to briefly explain what this chat room is all about and either invite people or not invite people, depending on whether or not you want more? I don't know. You guys explain.
Ladies first, or I can say something.
Men first.
Okay. So look.
They said men, Ryan.
Oh, Zayabis.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So the Telegram channel is for engaging in this kind of dialogue with Scott, but it is humor and it is politics, and it's the best of both, I would say. Scott is an unending fount of ideas and dialogue and
Oh, stop.
history. And I've checked out his whole library in the back, every video. I've taken down all the titles of all the books there. I can see him. There's some good ones out there. So yeah, and then there's the three of us, and we make it awesome.
Especially on Fridays.
Oh yeah.
Especially on Fridays.
So Scott, you
let
gotta
me-
be careful because when you return to the chat,
Ну, правильно.
it's
When
insane.
you have it on Fridays.
I won't be allowed to return to the chat. I'm being banned from the chat. But no, but in all seriousness, when my difficulties with Twitter, by the way, Jeff, I'm still banned, but that's okay.
Oh, but you don't think it's a major step forward? I'm trying to keep in a good mood now instead of arguing, but come on. Scott's Twitter feed is now visible to the public again. He doesn't have access yet. I understand. Take it easy. But the fact that your Twitter feed has been made visible, is that not an indication that things are headed in the right direction? Does that seem to you like they're headed in the wrong direction or the right direction?
Well, I just want to remind you, Jeff, that the last time I appealed my Twitter ban, my Twitter feed was made visible to everybody, and everybody could look at it and go, "Oh, geez, look, isn't this wonderful? We can see Scott's Twitter feed," and then they permanently banned me. So I will tell you right now that we're simply repeating history, and historical trends suggest that I will be permanently banned. So getting back to this, Jeff, I'm sorry. It's Merry Christmas. I don't mean to irritate you.
Merry Christmas. I love you too.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ksenia. Sorry, Alex. Sorry.
But
Ryan.
the fact of the matter is, I started a Telegram channel, I guess, that I would post things to. And I'm literally the most incompetent person in the world about social media. So I basically wrote an article, and then I would post it, and it would sit there. And people would read it, but there was no interaction going on. And I forget where I saw it in the comment section of one of the articles. Somebody named Daria, so I'm giving her full credit for it. Daria, who is a member of our Telegram chat, by the way, said, "Why don't you enable the chat feature?" And of course, I had to be walked through the process, and I made this chat room. And then immediately, what happened is people started coming in, and then well-meaning people said, "Scott, if you don't moderate this thing, it's going to get out of control. You're going to get." Well, I don't mean out of control like it is now. I mean out of control in a bad way. People are going to post things that shouldn't be posted in chat rooms, and it's going to get off topic, etc. And so there were a handful of people that were making these comments, and then I would also follow how they acted in the chat room. Two of them were gentlemen, Igor and one other whose name,
Mark.
Yes, Mark, him. And they were the initiators. I recruited them, and they did. And then there was this other person,
Mark.
Ksenia, and so I asked her to be a member too. Worst mistake of my life, because she is the most irresponsible administrator in chat room one can imagine. So to bring balance to this, because we now had an out of control chat room, because of the fact that she's from Canada, she can dominate my time zones as opposed to the Russians going to sleep at responsible times. I brought in this entity I thought was a chat bot. It billed itself as somebody named Alex, but I knew it was artificial intelligence, and I brought it in to bring control. But no, the Ksenia machine took over Alex, or Alex took over Ksenia, and they spun totally out of control. So I needed to bring in some muscle to bring this thing under control. And so I asked Ryan, I begged Ryan, please, Ryan, come in and bring this under control. And all he has done is encourage the ridiculousness that's transpiring. It's the greatest thing ever, because I'll tell you what, there are days that if I were a serious geopolitical follower, I would pull my hair out looking at what's going on in the chat room because it's anything but serious geopolitical talk. But on the other hand, do you really want to spend all day going suicidal, bashing your head against an intellectual wall that is the difficulty that is the Donbass? So I think, if people would just take a step back and take a chill pill, they'd understand that there's a time and place for levity, that it isn't wrong for people to interact in a positive manner with other people, a humorous manner. And I don't think, even though Ksenia should probably be banned at certain times, Alex, that's up to you. The fact is, I don't think there's anything that happens in this chat room that anybody could ever have a problem with. It's family oriented. We go out of our way to make sure that there's no untoward content, and we keep away the haters. Some people accuse us of trying to control the tone and the content, and that's just absolutely false. I have no problem. I have to tell you, the attack dogs that are Ksenia and Alexandra, they ban people for even insinuating they don't like what I say. Scott Ritter is a ban. Don't do that, guys. Let them hate me. I'm okay with the hate. But the fact of the matter is, through their action, we actually turn the room into a positive vibe, a place where people can actually have important conversations. And believe me, there are some very important conversations that take place in this room when Ksenia is not dressing up as a unicorn and Alexandra is not, publishing weird.
You should not have said that.
And Ryan's not taking his shirt off.
Ksenia showed up at your Poughkeepsie event?
Ksenia and her husband Dwight showed up. They took a train from Toronto down to Poughkeepsie.
Wow, they
and
let her
she
cross borders, huh?
she came in and they, the saying, beware of Greeks bearing gifts.
Oh yeah. Oh
She
yeah.
brought the mug. And so
Who did?
now she's
Ksenia?
insinuated
Ksenia?
herself into every aspect of our show, Jeff, because
Who, Ksenia?
yeah.
Yeah, that.
Oh, you're the one who gave him the mug. Oh,
Jeff, do you want to ask me a question?
Nope, I don't.
Well, just in case you did, this one. There you go. But Ksenia gave me this gift. It's a great gift. I thank you for it. I'm always doing it. Alexandra, you owe me a Tom's beer or two. And Ryan, I'm not drinking whiskey with you. I don't drink whiskey anymore, but.
All right. Well,
Okay.
you mentioned,
Another Diet
injecting.
Coke.
Or beer. One.
You mentioned injecting humor into a serious topic, and I think that's where the overlap is between these folks and this particular podcast. I don't know about Ksenia and Alex, if you're familiar with MASH, one of the greatest sitcoms of all time and also a movie. And that's exactly what they did. And so it's in that spirit of, it's human. And in fact, I don't even know why I'm getting defensive about it. Forget it. If you can't take the joke, go somewhere else.
Let me say the following, and this is in all seriousness. As I said, some serious conversations take place in this room. Ryan injects an unbelievable depth of not just history, but geopolitics. And I'm actually surprised when he says KGB bot. I'm convinced he is KGB and he's infiltrating this chat room trying to win me over. It's not working, Ryan. It's not working. But no, the seriousness. Every time a topic's brought up, that like I'll write something in an article, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm really innovative. I've really come on to something here. And then Ryan will go, yeah, back in 1986, when I wrote my third master's degree, I delved into this. I mean, the guy is just a font of knowledge about everything. He speaks Russian. He's awesome. But what I'm trying to get at is this is value added. And then there's Ksenia, who brings in a philosophical angle. And we can smile about it because we joke about it. But the fact of the matter is, I never realized that Aristotle and Plato and everybody else, that the actual philosophy of the ancient Greeks has relevance to today. And she's in there giving us excerpts from her PhD thesis about this. And on the one hand, you could sit there and shrug it off. But on the other hand, when you read what she says, she's right. And it adds a very intellectual depth. And then there's Alexandra, who just out of the blue every once in a while decides that she's going to condense everything we've been chatting about for the last 40 minutes into this lengthy piece that captures everything perfectly. And she just posts it. And it's like, wow, this is
Lengthy.
a self-regulating.
Lengthy?
Pardon?
Did you say lengthy?
Yeah. Have you ever read anything that she posts that she
Oh,
writes?
yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It wasn't a tautology either.
You remember that word. Good for you.
Yes. It's been an educational experience as well as an endearing experience in interacting with these folks during the week. I learned the word tautological from Ksenia, and I learned that Alex has a lot to say. Are you on good terms with your publisher, Scott? Because if you are, you might want to introduce them to Alex. I think she may have a book to be published.
I'm on good terms with the publisher, but I think Alex I'm convinced she's actually one of the most important people in Russia. And it's not me that has to provide an introduction to anything. Alex, I think, can pick up the phone and call Putin right now and make things happen. So,
is she your liaison to the big guy?
She's not mine, but I think she was put in to the chat room by senior Russian authorities saying, keep it under control and keep a check on this guy and make sure it doesn't get out of control, because she knows an awful lot. That's why I call her artificial intelligence, because this is really one of the smartest people out there.
Look at her playing innocent, pretending she doesn't know English. All right. Well, it's great to meet you guys. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I look forward to developing an even deeper relationship with you. And we were talking earlier about some events that we're planning. Ksenia traveled to Poughkeepsie, so maybe you all can travel to some of the other events that we're planning.
She's actually traveling to Texas on maybe March. Can I say it?
Yet. It's not certain because
Okay.
I have to wait when they. I still don't know whether they accepted my paper for the conference, so I have to wait until January 13, I believe.
But what
So
would the
it's
date
not
be?
certain.
I don't want to be the one
Oh,
giving away the.
You want to know the date?
That you might be in
Jeff can
Texas.
plan with his contact.
Let's say the end of March.
Okay,
The end of March.
theoretically,
All right.
the end of March in Texas. Jeff, make it
That could
happen.
work. We're looking at mid-March in the Oakland area.
Oakland, yeah.
And we're talking to Ryan about Austin and another Ryan in Dallas. So if you're watching tonight, Ryan, maybe let's try to make it late March so that Ksenia can make it. Hopefully the stars will align so this all comes together.
And she's going to some sort of weird, geeky, nerdy Plato conference. So maybe she can bring all of her group
It's
people.
not Plato.
What
No, no,
part
no.
of Texas,
No, it's
Ksenia?
not Plato. It's Aristotle. Forget
I'm
about that.
Same thing. It's all
I'm
Greek to me.
convincing her Plato, not Aristotle.
Ksenia, what
Yeah.
part of Texas is it?
It's Austin.
Oh, great. Okay, where Ryan is. All right, great. So love you. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah.
Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.
Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas.
See you over on Telegram.
Sounds
All right.
good.
Thanks, guys.
See you
Thanks.
tomorrow.
Bye.
Toodles.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Tori. You can switch the avatar thing back if you want.
Well,
Tori.
Jeff, that was just very pleasant. Thank you for doing that.
The P word, pleasant. All
That
right.
bad word?
No, not at all.
All right.
It was pleasant. It's been pleasant dealing with them, too. Craig from Pacific Grove, what are the chances the U.S. will militarily overthrow the Saudi ruling prince the way it did Saddam Hussein? What is Saudi military strength versus Iraq? Do you need a moment to just digest what just happened before we get back to this? Was that too abrupt, Scott?
No, I'm very good at transitioning.
Okay.
They train that in the Marine Corps.
All right. You adjust to circumstances as they arise.
Yeah. I mean, right now I got 4 drill instructors in my face. So, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. The strategic relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia is considerable. And you take a look at some of the impact that the Saudi decision not to increase oil production is having on America's strategic posture with the rest of the world and domestically. I would imagine that somewhere in the bowels of the CIA, there are people who specialize in, political action. And there are conversations taking place about what to do about MBS and in Saudi Arabia and the trajectory that Saudi Arabia is on. Because right now we have a trajectory that is pretty much rejecting America's dominance. It's a trajectory that has the Saudis considering and actually using using currencies other than the dollar to pay for oil. So they're talking about buying, excuse me, buying or selling oil to China for yuan. They're talking about selling oil to India for rupees. This is just a huge deal. It's the diminishment of the petrodollar. And if the American government doesn't have a plan for adapting to this, it could lead to major strategic imbalances in how the United States operates with the rest of the world. And it's that kind of stage, or that kind of situation that sets the stage for regime change. So yeah, if I were MBS, I'd be taking a very close look at the people around me, people who have connectivity with the United States, and I'd be watching my six. I'd be wondering, who's going to move it, because when you start to gravitate away from the United States, you're no longer America's friend. You're now America's enemy. And as soon as the United States determines that Saudi Arabia no longer has the utility that it once had in terms of America's geopolitical posture, then the United States will put regime change on the table. Why? Because that's what we do. That's what we do. You talked about the Saudi army versus the Iraqi army. Let me put it to you as mildly as possible. The Saudis can't fight. Can't fight. They can't fight wars of aggression. They're not very aggressive. They're not good at dying. The Iraqi army of Saddam Hussein would have eaten the Saudi army for lunch, for breakfast, and for dinner. Would have been no fight whatsoever. The Saudis actually farm out their military. A lot of Pakistanis fight for Saudi Arabia because they're good soldiers, good officers. So they go out and they get the Pakistanis to provide these people who now fight in Saudi uniform. But take a look at what happens in Yemen. Every time a Saudi unit gets hooked up with a Houthi, it's bad day for the Saudis. And I'm not picking on their officers too much, but when you look like the Pillsbury Doughboy, you ain't much of a fighter.
And they dress like a bunch of transvestites too.
Well, come on, Jeff. Now we don't want to go there. Okay. Robes is their national dress.
Yeah, well, whatever.
We have to respect that.
It's a good look. Yeah, here in the U.S., half of the male population dresses with their pants down.
Have another glass of wine, Jeff. Jeez. There's a great song. I forget who sang it, but might have been on SNL, but Pants on the Ground, I think it was. It's just a spoof on
that's a real good look. Acid, we'll skip that. Acid fuzz pedals. Any chance to reinstate INF or a new treaty akin to INF?
I'm sticking with the name Acid Fuzz Pedals right now. I'm thinking that's sort of a take on Tommy Morello and the wonderful little gad that he uses to get all of his guitar sounds. So I like that name. Okay, any chance to reinstate INF or a new treaty akin to INF? Yes, yes, yes. There's a chance. Unfortunately, to get a new INF on the table, I think we're going to have to replicate the path that was taken to get to the original INF, which is escalation to the point of both sides recognizing how dangerous the situation is. Right now, the Russians have a missile called the 9M729, which the United States says operates in violation of the INF treaty, too long of a range. The Russians say no. And I think the Russians are right that it's not in violation. Could be wrong, but I think they're right. The United States is getting ready to respond to this, A, by withdrawing from the treaty, which they already did, but B, deploying a new missile called the Dark Eagle, which is an INF range. It means it has a range of between 500 and 5,500 miles or kilometers, and I'm drawing a blank right now. I'm thinking miles. They're going to deploy this. This will have a hypersonic a warhead. So it will have the ability to carry out a non-nuclear decapitation strike on Moscow, where 5 minutes from the moment the missile is launched, there will be impact in Moscow. This is a very dangerous situation because conventional decapitation is the same thing as nuclear decapitation. When you start decapitating the leadership of Russia, their nuclear doctrine will kick in. Is a silly name for marketing my business. Okay, but I like the name. So I'm going to pretend.
See the logo too. He's got
I see that.
Like a psychedelic logo.
That's awesome. Okay, but I like your question too. The fact of the matter is, I think that once we escalate to that point, we may get some pushback on the part of Europe, especially Europe that's starting to question as Emmanuel Macron is, as the Germans might be doing in the near future. They are questioning the long-term strategic relationship with the United States. They are beginning to understand that maybe Europe should learn how to stand on its own 2 feet and secure itself without the pressure of American global national security policy and the vagaries of American domestic politics interfering. And if Europe starts to wake up to the fact that thanks to the United States withdrawal from the INF Treaty and the deployment of the Dark Eagle system, that all of Europe has become a viable nuclear target for the Russians, and if there's a conflict, Europe will disappear overnight, maybe the Europeans will say, we need a new treaty vehicle, and maybe they'll get the United States to go in on it. And that's what happened in the 1980s, in the late 1970s, early mid-1980s. We were able to take the angst and anxiety created by the American response to the deployment of the SS-20 Soviet road mobile INF missile. We responded with the Pershing II and the ground-launched cruise missile, and the inherent instability that was engendered from that led to both sides recognizing that rather than commit suicide, we should come together, sign the INF Treaty, and get rid of these weapons. And I'm hopeful that at some point in time in the future, an American president will have the political and moral courage, like Ronald Reagan did, to sit down with his Russian counterpart, whether it's Vladimir Putin or somebody else, and they will recognize that the best way forward is a new INF treaty that will get rid of these destabilizing weapons and create the kind of opportunity for the de-escalation and deconfliction of the current state of tension. So I'm a big believer in arms control. I'm a big believer in the INF treaty. It worked once, and I'd like to believe it could work again.
There's a rumor going around you have a book that addresses some of these issues.
Well, I asked you to ask me about it earlier, but you refused to do so. But
I didn't realize Ksenia was the one who gave you the mug.
Yeah.
It all comes together tonight. Jerry from Southwest Iowa. What role has King Charles played in the escalation of the war? Right after he was made king, the Russian pipeline was blown up. Well, it also happened right after I went to the dentist, but I'm not sure that was the cause.
I think so. When a butterfly flaps its wings in California, pipelines blow up in the Baltic.
It's the butterfly's fault and mine for going to the dentist. Did King Charles give the okay to do it? It's hard to get through this question with a straight face, but okay. Have you read the book by Joan Vion, Prince Charles, the Sustainable Prince? Joan thought he is a big player in world affairs, even though he is not talked about much.
I haven't read the book. I'll see if I can find the time to do so. But I will just say, based upon the reality of the British Constitution, King Charles, like Queen Elizabeth prior, has no say whatsoever in the national security affairs of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, England, or any other constituent part, Wales, Scotland, etc. The royal family is a figurehead. They are head of state, meaning that the queen or the king now can dissolve parliament under certain circumstances, but the decisions are made by the prime minister and the parliament, and they don't come together. It's unconstitutional for the British monarch to impose themselves on issues of domestic policy, foreign policy, etc. They can advise, they can bring in the prime minister for consultations, but the notion that King Charles is somehow directing, the king cannot pick up the phone and say, hey, send the SAS to do this. No one's going to pick up that phone because the king constitutionally can't do that, and nobody's constitutionally allowed to receive that. The prime minister can make that call. The king can't call the prime minister and say, why don't you have the SAS do this? The prime minister will say, with all due respect, Your Royal Highness, that's not your lane. Get out of my lane. Get back to where you're supposed to be. Or else we may decide to go Republican and get rid of the monarchy. This is the great risk. Right now, the British public is pleased with the relationship. They like having a monarchy. Most of them. Not all of them, but most of them. Isn't he the head of the Canadian-Australian military? Figuratively, he's the head of state, but I can guarantee you that the king does not issue orders to Canada or the Australians. Just doesn't happen. Constitutionally, it's not allowed to happen. The Australians would vote out any prime minister who took the king's call and acted upon it. Same thing with the Canadians. It's just not permitted to happen constitutionally. So, King Charles, no, I think Charles operates within his lane. He knows what his responsibilities are. He knows what the limitations of his power are. And I think they also know that if they do something that seems to be untoward by the British people, that the adoration that currently exists can go away in a heartbeat, and the king may find himself without a crown.
Okay. By the way, while we were visiting with our friends from Telegram, we got a message that Tori flashed on there from the angel in Quebec. So maybe he was watching from the emergency room, or maybe he's home. But in any case, let's take that as a positive sign. Alexi, there's an opinion that live nuke tests should not have been stopped so that people could see and remember to be scared of using them. What are your thoughts on this? Do people need to remember to be scared?
The problem with live nuke tests is that they, they're live nuke tests. If you want to live in a world without nuclear weapons, stop testing nuclear weapons. That's the first thing you have to do, is delegitimize them. So the last thing you'd want to do is keep having tests to promote their lethality as a sign of deterrence. We need to get beyond that moment into one where we're not developing new nuclear weapons. And one of the ideas of getting rid of nuclear testing is that that would stop the arms race, stop the desire to develop new nuclear weapons, new generations of nuclear weapons, etc., to take the ones that we have and then gracefully allow them to be decommissioned as part of an overall disarmament path that leads us to nuclear zero. We're not there. And right now there's a lot of temptation on the part of people in the United States, and I would imagine even in Russia or elsewhere, to resume nuclear testing, because our nuclear designs are getting old. Some of the materials are I don't want to get into too much nuclear design aspect here, but for instance, the W-76 thermonuclear warhead that we use in Trident submarines, has this peanut-shaped, system, which is a dual firing thermonuclear. You start off the fusion, it becomes fission, or maybe it's fission and fusion, I don't know, but it basically is a double charged thermonuclear weapon, but it's a peanut-shaped thing. It has to be suspended in the warhead with foam. And that foam deteriorates over time. And so the peanut can shift, and then it doesn't work. And so, you've got to, disassemble that, put in the new foam, but we don't know how to make the foam because we haven't made it in a long time. The guys that made it are all dead. It's like when we took the battleships, the World War II battleships, and we decided when to bring them back on active service under Ronald Reagan. And everybody thought that was a great idea until they realized they had to repair the battleship. And you're like, okay, well, we need some of that steel plate. And they're saying, we can't produce that kind of steel anymore. Why not? Well, we only produced it back in World War II. It's got a specific formula and specific production requirements, and all the guys that did it are dead. And so they had to literally go around and find some 90-year-old guys. I don't remember how to do that. And then they were able to put this together. And they sort of riffed off of that. If you remember the Steven Seagal movie about the chef on the ship, where they had the old timers on the Missouri that were there to decommission it. But the fact is, they had to bring back a bunch of old guys to teach the new sailors how to do things on the battleship because we hadn't done them in a while, and things of that nature. That's with nuclear weapons too. A lot of our weapons are starting to get old, to age. I don't want to get into too much nuclear design, but this is publicly available. I think there's a specific gas, might be tritium, something like that over time degrades. So you got to produce more, and then you've got to get that injected into the system. And, the bottom line is, I think there's some concern that not all the nuclear weapons are going to work if we ever have to use them, that we'll fire them under siege. They will fire them and they're going to arrive on target and they're going to fizzle. They're going to do something, but they ain't going to go boom. And that's not good, because if people realize that the nuclear weapons aren't going to work, then they're not going to fear them. You lose your deterrence. Some run with floppy disk. You're darn right they do. That's the reality. The Minuteman system has a command and control modules that date back to the 60s, and they still use floppy disks as part of their system. And they're talking about having to rebuild all this stuff from the ground up. But the nuclear warheads are aging. And ideally, we would have found a way to negotiate their termination as systems, meaning we don't need them anymore. We don't want them anymore. But unfortunately, especially now, given the tensions between Russia and the United States, we're building new weapons, new generation of weapons, et cetera. But now if you're going to build a new delivery system, you want the warhead to work. And there's a lot of people saying we need to carry out nuclear tests as part of the assurance program for our nuclear enterprise. Right now, we do a lot of computer modeling. But computer modeling is still, it's only as good as the people writing the program. If you make a mistake, you could then have a false sense of accomplishment that everything works, but in fact we missed something. It doesn't work. The only way to actually prove that a design functions is to test it in a live condition, like we used to do at the Nevada test range. But again, I just think that would be counterproductive to do it, because what that does is legitimize nuclear weapons. It breathes life into this enterprise whose we really should be trying to bring down to as close to zero as possible.
All right. That's the loquacious way to say we'll remember to be scared. Eric Suarez.
Are you telling me I took too long to answer that question, Jeff?
Not at all. Not at all. What do you think about the various conflicts like Syria, Serbia, etc. at this moment? Is it possible for the U.S. to overexpand itself with smaller conflicts?
Well, the answer is yes, it is possible for the U.S. to overexpand itself with smaller conflicts. The one thing we need to understand is that the United States is thousands of miles away from most of these conflicts. So in order for us to be engaged in them, we have to project military power, which requires expeditionary military capability, which is far more expensive than its equivalent of just static defending your homeland capability. So I can have a division on the border that's very combat capable, but doesn't do me any good in Syria unless I can move it. But training that division, equipping that division, having the capacity to move that division, this expeditionary capacity costs a lot of money. The United States has diminished its expeditionary capacity. During Desert Storm, we put 500 to 700,000 troops into the Persian Gulf. We had tremendous expeditionary capacity. We had ships, entire squadrons, 3 or 4 squadrons of ships that had a division's worth or brigade's worth of equipment already on them, ready to go. The equipment was maintained constantly, and these ships could come into ports, offload their equipment, then we fly in the troops who marry up with the equipment and can go to war. That way we don't have to ship the stuff from the United States. We don't do this that much anymore. We've drawn down. We have some pre-positioned stocks in Kuwait. We're starting to put some back into Poland, but we got rid of all the pre-positioned stocks we had in Germany. It used to be during the Cold War, we had entire corps worth of equipment there. We're talking multiple divisions, and we would fly in up to 250,000 troops to marry up this equipment to rapidly reinforce within 10 days America's combat capability in West Germany to confront any Soviet advance. We got rid of that. We got rid of everything. We used to have over 10,000 tanks in Europe. We went down at one point in time in the early 2000s to zero. We got rid of all of our tanks. Then people woke up and said, that's probably a mistake. So we're trying to rebuild that capacity, but it's very expensive. So the United States doesn't have this kind of expeditionary capacity. And even when we do, let's take, for instance, a look at the conflict in Syria. The conflict in Syria, we have several hundred, sometimes a little bit more than 1,000 combat troops deployed in northern Syria. Their logistics operates through into Iraq, northern Iraq, in the town of Erbil, where we have a great logistics hub for them. In fact, most of the headquarters units that provide the troops operate out of Erbil. Now, we can supply Erbil through the airfield, through an airlift, but that's very expensive. Again, look at the history of the Berlin airlift and understand what it took for the United States, Great Britain to supply the city of Berlin with the material necessary to survive, the food, the medicine, etc. It was a very concerted effort that could have been shut down by the Soviets at any time. There were 3 air lanes that were opened up, and the Soviets, had they wanted to, they could have shut down the air lanes, and Berlin would have starved. If Erbil is going to survive on an airlift, all the insurgents have to do is shut down the airfield, and the airplanes can't land, and we lose everything. So we have a contingent in Kuwait where we drive through Iraq up to Erbil and then out. That's a long highway, very vulnerable highway. This is a very expensive proposition. So to support a few hundred troops in Syria costs us billions of dollars and requires thousands of additional troops to do that. And that means that when we commit all these forces to do that, we lose the ability to operate elsewhere because we don't have an endless supply of troops able to do this anymore. So the fact of the matter is we can't operate. Look at Serbia. Let's say Serbia goes hot. Back when in 1999 we had significant forces in Serbia that could, or in Europe, that could respond. We had a division. I think the first armored division actually responded as one of the initial elements of KFOR, the Kosovo occupation force. We don't have that anymore. We have a brigade of strikers. We have a heavy armor brigade that rotates through. And that's it. So if Serbia goes hot, we don't have anybody to respond to it because everything we have right now is in Poland, facing off against the Russians in Ukraine, or in Romania. We have no reserves left in Germany. So let's say Serbia goes hot. Europe's going to be on its own. The German and Latvian troops that are currently in Kosovo are going to have to hold the line while what? While NATO mobilizes? Mobilizes what? They got nothing left to mobilize. So they're going to be dependent upon the United States. Are we going to send the 82nd Airborne? I'm sorry, they're ready brigades in Poland right now. We're going to send the Marines? Gosh, the Marines sort of pivoted to the Pacific. They're only focused on China right now. We got nothing left. So yeah, these little wars all over the place dissipate the national strength. You're sitting there saying, well, this doesn't make any sense, Ritter, because we spend $890 billion a year on our military. Certainly there's something in that budget where we can produce these units. Yeah, except we build things like the B-21 bomber. Costs a lot of money. We have the B-2 bomber. Every time it crashes, that's $1 billion down the drain. We have the F-35 fighter, which is crashing a lot lately. And when that crashes, that's $700 million down the drain. This stuff costs a lot. We put a lot of money into research and development. We put a lot of money into things that have nothing to do with actual boots on the ground, bayonets, etc. We have very limited capability right now to deploy American forces abroad. And every time we get another hotspot like Serbia, like Syria, or anything else that might pop up down the road, that just further weakens us. And every time we have a major issue like what's going on right now in Europe with Ukraine, it sucks the life out of the entire military to support it, meaning we have nothing left to do anything else out there. When I was in the military, we could fight 2.5 wars at one time. That means we were prepared to fight the Soviets in Europe, we were prepared to fight the Chinese or the North Koreans in the Pacific, and we were prepared to fight a holding action in the Middle East until we won one of these wars and diverted the troops back in. Right now, we can't even fight a half a war.
Let's turn our attention to the live comments coming in, and Tori has some questions lined up for us, I believe. But before we get to that, I saw something come in from Alex, who said to please go to the Telegram chat afterwards. They have another surprise for you.
I'm a little
nervous. Somebody asked, well, what is your Telegram? There it is. And somebody asked, well, what is your Telegram channel? How do they find you? We should put a link up by tomorrow. I'll have a link up to it, but can you just tell them verbally, or maybe Ryan, if you're watching?
Well, that's the Telegram channel right there is Scott Ritter. But then there's this thing called Scott Ritter Chat. Right. And I don't know how it exists, but I don't know how you get into the chat room.
Okay.
That's the thing I don't know.
So if Ryan or Alex or Ksenia is watching and you want to give us a message on how to find it.
What?
By the way, those of you who've never been to Telegram before, it's a wacky world. Part of it is there's a lot of fakes on there. There's fake Scott Ritters. So, just make sure you get the Join the chat from that link. Okay, so Tori, you want to put that link back up, and they can get to the chat from there, and that's all they know.
Apparently,
That's
you go
all
on
they
that,
need.
you click, and you can get into the chat room. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. And we'll put
Everybody's
a link on.
welcome.
And ScottRitterExtra.com is always the link to everything. So we'll make sure we have a link to Telegram there by tomorrow, I promise.
Hey. All right.
Yeah. Yes.
Real quick, hold on a second. The issue on that is that when they go to that link and they actually have a little button at the bottom that says join, and they can join into the chat from that link. I posted about 1,000 times there in the live chat, but yeah, that's how they get in there. So they go to that link that Tori posted, and at that link, which has all the articles right there, they can join the chat. And they have rules. They got to read the rules. We can break the rules, but everybody else cannot.
Yeah. Twitter censors Scott, and they censor you guys.
That's right. That's right. Because
There ain't no free speech in the Scott Ritter chat. I'm telling you right now.
I mean, Scott
My
would not.
name is not Elon Musk. The bird ain't free.
That's right. He wouldn't let me take my shirt off in his living room during a Thanksgiving dinner. So there you go.
All right. Got it. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks.
You may now go back to lifting weights.
Which he does prodigiously.
Yes, apparently. So this is the last Ask the Inspector episode of the year. We're taking next week off. And also the other podcast we do, that's with Tori and I, called Scenes from the Evolution. We're taking the week off as well. And then we're switching to a new day, which is Sundays. Did you ever listen to Breakfast with the Beatles? It's a syndicated radio show. Is it on in your area, Scott? Breakfast with the Beatles. Does that ring a bell at all?
It might be, but I don't listen to radio.
Oh, yeah. I've been listening to it for years, so that's what's sort of like in my brain. That's the vibe that I have. It doesn't really, not that we're going to be dealing with the Beatles stuff, but anyway, Sundays, hopefully
Well, how come you have such a good vibe with Tori? You don't have such a good vibe with me. Why don't we have a Breakfast with the Beatle vibe? What's going on?
Because she's Tori, and you're a vicious macho Marine.
Okay, that explains.
That's
everything.
a question that answers itself. So we're switching to Sundays, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern. Very easy to remember our debut date because it is the first day of the year, New Year's Day. And then as far as Ask the Inspector goes, we'll be back that same week, Tuesday, January 3rd for the lightning round, and then our Friday night loquacious version on January 6th. Thank you, Suzanne. Happy holidays.
But January 6th may be a problem. We might have to be January 5th.
What?
Because I think I have a book event in Troy, New York on January 6th.
All right. We'll cope as we always do.
Thank you.
Did the COVID mandate gut the U.S. military?
No, I mean, it was, depending where, I think it was wrong to kick people out for standing up for what they believe in. The science was questionable. This was purely a political move. But the numbers that were compelled to leave the military, I don't believe gutted the military. I think anytime you lose people who have committed their professional lives to service of their country, anytime you compel them to terminate that relationship for something as stupid, frankly speaking, as the COVID mandate, it's unfortunate, and it shouldn't have happened. And let's just remember, the United States Army right now is thousands of people short of its recruiting goal. They can't attract people, and yet they kicked out people who had and oftentimes given significant portions of their life in service of their country. But that's look. I don't
the
pretend.
The key word you used is questionable. That is exactly the right word to use. Anybody who says they're sure about the vaccine being effective or not effective, either way, no. That's fake certainty. It's really a big, fat question mark.
Right, and which means because you don't have certainty, why do you have to exercise certainty in judgment for when people have the right to question it? All I have is anecdotal information. I will tell you this: every time I got the shot, I felt like I was going to die. I got sicker after the shot than anything COVID. I've had COVID 3 or 4 times. It's like a flu. It's like a cold. It's not a big deal. I know there's people that die from it and all that stuff, but the shot just about killed me. I felt like I was going to die. My brain was going to explode. I couldn't breathe. And so, from my perspective, I'm sitting there going, seems to me like the shot did more damage to me than anything. And then we find out that the shot doesn't prevent transmission. The shot doesn't prevent me from catching it. I don't know what the shot does. And if you're saying, well, all the shot does is reduce the symptoms in you, then there is no societal reasoning why I have to get it to protect society. If all the shot's going to do is limit the damage done to me, then that should be my choice whether I want to take the shot or not. But they were saying, no, you have to take it to prevent the spread of the disease. That turned out to be a bald-faced lie. The shot doesn't prevent the spread. You have to take it to prevent you from catching it. That turned out to be a bald-faced lie. The shot doesn't prevent you from catching it. And yet they kicked American patriots out of the military because they didn't want to follow what they felt was questionable science.
Right. We have a member of our team who refused to get a vaccination. Who do you think that might be?
You.
Nope. Correct. Tori?
Well, I got the 2 Pfizer ones. I didn't want to, but it's kind of a complicated story behind that. But I never got the boosters. I quit my job because of the policy that came after me having the shots done. The policy didn't allow for religious exemptions, so I think that's where you get the impression that I didn't.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't realize it was just a booster you refused. I remember you had an employment issue because of your refusal. Okay. All right. Should we let her infect us on this podcast because she refused to get the booster, or what?
Well, I think we should promote her.
All right. You feel healthy, Tori?
Yeah, I mean, just not COVID, but I do feel a little under the weather. I feel like I am getting a little sick. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice.
Oh, okay. Well, there goes that argument.
Well, I have
the poster child right now.
I haven't gotten COVID that I know of.
Okay, not diagnosed. I had COVID symptoms before COVID was recognized to be here in the U.S., so I don't know what to make of that exactly.
You're ground zero.
I am, at least potentially. All right, what else you got, Tori, besides the flu?
What does Scott think of the latest border clash?
Steve Persad has a question. What does Scott think of the latest border clashes between China and India? Why now? Which of those countries would win a war between the two? By the way, this word tautological was used in connection with me reading questions out loud that we can also see. And the reason I do it is because we also have an audio-only version on Spotify, and people wouldn't understand the context if they heard only the question. So sorry to bore those of you who
what does tautological mean?
Tautological means essentially redundant.
I guess there's a lot of tautology going on.
Well, now that I said, you see what I'm saying? It is redundant. Tautological is a $3 word, and redundant is a $2 word.
Okay, what's a $1 word? I can come up with a $1 word. I give you a 50-cent word.
I'm going to look it up on the dictionary right now to see.
Okay, well, I answer the question while you're doing that. What do I think of the latest border clash between China and India? I think it's reflective of the reality that the delineation of national boundaries between these two nations is a very complicated problem to which there is no ready solution. The Chinese and the Indians were working on resolving issues related to the border in a different part of the border where there had been previous clashes. And those areas, there was some significant deconfliction. But just because you seem to have resolved an issue in a certain area, in another area, it rose up. And I think that the bottom line is there is not going to be a simplistic solution for the whole border, that each issue is going to have to be worked out over time, but that both China and India recognize that it's in their best interest to avoid escalating any one of these border conflicts into a shooting war, because that again, what brought about the earlier deconfliction was a statement made by the Indian foreign minister, or external affairs minister, that basically quoted a former Chinese Communist Party leader, Deng, who had talked about the Pacific century, and that there wouldn't be an Asian century in the Pacific so long as India and China didn't fix their border problems. And the Indian person used that language of the Pacific century, sending a signal to China saying, "Hey, man, we got problems. If we don't fix them, there is not going to be a Pacific. We're going to be fighting amongst ourselves, divide and conquer. The Americans are going to control the Pacific for another century." So the Chinese responded immediately and said, "We got your message," and they began the talks. So I think that diplomatic process is still underway, and that's the dominating factor. But the fact is, the different border conflicts are still there that need to be individually resolved, and that's where we're at. Who would win a conflict between India and China? None. No one's going to win. First of all, if you've taken a look at the map, taking a look at the terrain they'd be fighting in, there's no such thing as favorable terrain. It's a fight that would be at high altitude in remote locations and in the roughest terrain possible. You'd never be able to bring forward significant numbers of troops. So it would always be sort of this war of attrition that nobody wins, everybody loses. I think both sides recognize that it's literally something they don't want to get involved in. So it's always a concern when you have Indians and Chinese throwing bricks at each other, beating each other with sticks. But I'll tell you what, they weren't shooting at each other, which means both sides recognize that we don't need this thing to spin out of control.
There's the dictionary definition of tautological.
Do you spell that right?
Yeah, I think that.
Sure.
No,
I'm being redundant, Jeff.
I think the definition itself is tautological.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, or at least wordy. I mean, redundant. That kind of covers it, right?
Who introduced this word to you?
Ksenia.
Of course she did. Jesus.
She's smarter than I am, and she has a better vocabulary than I have, and she wasn't even born in this country.
She speaks English better than I do. I'll tell you that much. They all do. Anybody does, though. A third grader from Brooklyn speaks English better than I do.
Oh, please. Joe Hickey, who, well, I won't even say that. But I'm not sure I'd want to go through life with the name Hickey. Let's just leave it at that. Question for the inspector. That would be the guy to ask a question to. What do you make of Russia block on northern sea route and Brathwaite response of intending to ignore restrictions? Please, Merry Christmas to one and all. Here's to a peaceful New Year. It's a little bit imperfectly expressed, but perhaps you can get in there.
I mean, have the Russians actually blocked the northern sea route? I think there's a treaty that allows the flow. I think the Russians take umbrage at sometimes about military vessels transiting just because of the threat that they pose to Russia's strategic forces. Braithwaite's response of tending to ignore restrictions. Jeff, what's that magic word I use all the time? Begins with an A.
Asterisk.
Thank you. We need to put one of them on that question so I can go back and study that in time to respond in the lightning round on January 3rd.
All right. Asterisk is almost as often used as
odious. Odious.
And also umbrage. We got to get an umbrage.
I like umbrage. I like umbrage. Yeah.
Rowdy
Who did you get to say odious?
What's that?
Who did you get to say odious? Where'd you get that voice from?
Oh, that's the dictionary.
The dictionary has that voice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, different dictionaries have different voices, but if you look up a word in an online dictionary, they'll have an audio thing.
Okay, that voice is designed not to encourage studying, but we'll just
odious.
Stop it.
And not only that, the definition is audio too. Here's the definition:
unequivocally detestable. Unequivocally detestable.
Okay, Rowdy Everlap, your predictions, yes or no, when all is said and done, does Russia end up taking Odessa? That would be the
yes.
Odessa, 2 S's.
Yes.
Yes with 1 S or 2 S's?
2 S's, baby. 2 S's.
Then we know you mean it. All right. There you go. Thanks for the contribution. Philip Hall, if you were a Ukrainian soldier, Scott, what would you do now?
I would probably die leading my troops in an assault on the Russian positions in Bakhmut.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to die. I wouldn't want to be leading the assault, but I'm a Ukrainian soldier. I'm going to defend my country. And I will go where they tell me to go, and I will do what they tell me to do. I wouldn't commit a war crime. I wouldn't execute Russian prisoners of war. I would probably refuse orders to fire artillery rounds into civilian areas. But if someone said, take that building in Bakhmut that's held by Wagner, I would attempt to take that building. I would probably die. My men would die. But that's unfortunately what's happening to Ukrainian soldiers right now. But if I was a Ukrainian soldier, then I would do my duty to my country.
Well, that is the answer I would have expected you to give. Axel Sohn, can you update us on your book signing in New York City on January 16th? I thought it was the 15th.
Yeah, the first thing is if we're talking about a book signing on the 16th, it's news to me. It's the 15th.
Right. How and when to sign up. Go to scottritterextra.com and click on book events page, and you'll have the info there. You want to say anything else about it, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, it's on the 15th. It starts at 4:00. The Russian Samovar restaurant it's a restaurant that my family and I have been going to for years, and we love it. We loved it. We had very good relations with the original owner. Every time we went there, we were made to feel like family. The food is wonderful. The environment, the whole ambiance is fantastic. They have new ownership, which I believe is a relative, who are struggling, to be honest, because of this conflict in Ukraine. Because of the politics attached to the name, like the Russian Samovar, even though the owners happen to be Ukrainian Jews. But nobody wants to talk about reality. And this place is suffering. People have tried to boycott it, force them to change their name. Why change the name? It's been called the Russian Samovar since day one. Let me say something about the talk on the 15th. The issue in Ukraine will not be raised, and I will not entertain questions about Ukraine. This is purely a talk about disarmament, about my book. So don't try and turn this into something that it's not intended to be. The owners deserve a clean event, and this event has been advertised as talking about that book. I will discuss disarmament. We can talk about any issues pertaining to disarmament, about the history, but I am not going to talk about Ukraine because that's not what this event is, and we don't need to bring that burden on this restaurant, on the owners. The event starts at 4:00. It's in the theater district of New York City, which means what they have is something called it's a theater fixed price menu. So if you were going to watch a play, generally the plays begin around 6:37 or something like that. They'll have a seating at 4:00, and so what they're giving me on the 15th is the 4:00 seating. We're getting the entire restaurant, the entire ground floor. Up to 90 people can be accommodated there. The price is listed on the website. I don't want to give you the price because I don't know exactly what it is off the top of my head. But what you get for the price is the standard fixed price menu of the restaurant, which is you're going to get a salad, a main course, a dessert. I think they're throwing in a complimentary shot of vodka. Plus you get my book. My book is included in the price of the ticket. And so you'll get the book, and then afterwards I have it on good information that the author will stick around and sign every book anybody puts in front of him. You can't stop him from signing books. If you don't want the book signed because you think it'll have increased value in eBay, don't bring it anywhere near the author because he's a fanatic. He will grab it and sign it before you can even say anything. I try to control him, but I can't. But the point is, it should be a very good event for what it is. What it isn't, again, I just want to emphasize again, it's not about discussing Ukraine. It's not talking about the current issue, the current conflict. What it is talking about is a very remarkable moment in Soviet American history, the INF Treaty. It is about disarmament, and it's about the potential for disarmament to help resolve some of the difficult situations that the Russia and the United States find themselves in today. Go on the website, click the thing. You buy the ticket there.
There it
you
is.
reserve
Go to
the seat.
scottritterextra.com and go to the book events page, and then it links to a page on the restaurant's website. I'm just sharing that page right now. You'll see there reservations, all the info is there. So that's how to make it happen. And it's good that Scott explained, because we would not have necessarily assumed that it's limited to that particular subject. So when we come back after the new year, we'll promote the heck out of it, and we'll make it clear to everybody what the topic is and what it isn't. Nightly moth. How is the best way to deal with family members who have lapped up all the mainstream media Ukraine war propaganda and look at you like you're insane when you try and explain the history of the other side?
Well,
Get new relatives.
I would say this, that and from my perspective, your relationship with your relatives is far more important than winning any debate about what's going on in Ukraine. And the best way to deal with it is make this one of those topics that you simply don't talk about. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I think you'll do more harm to your relationship with family members trying to undo the damage done by mainstream media than you would by simply saying, hey, you know what? Let's talk about the weather. Let's talk about something. We're just not going to talk about this issue. It's the same thing that, in presidential elections, I mean, they got pretty heated lately. And so the last thing that I'll just say, I was prohibited from talking about presidential politics when I visit my parents. I'm also prohibited from talking about the current situation in Russia when I visit my parents, because my
They
relationship
disagree with you?
vociferously.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, 'cause as you were saying this, I was wondering whether or not you're just giving sort of generic advice, or whether or not you yourself have to deal with it.
No, and so I love my mom, I love my dad, and I'm not going to do anything to cause that relationship to suffer. I might sometimes I make jokes. I don't know when to stop making jokes, and so I needle them. But at the end of the day, that we just don't have in-depth conversations about those issues. And you know what? That's okay, because I'm not going to change anything by convincing my mom that I'm right. That's just literally an argument that's not worth having.
Right. You don't need to win that argument. It's not
Don't
like
need
it's
to win it at all.
It's not like it's going to be a game changer. There's a phrase.
Oh, and my mom's 87 years old now. Do I really want to piss her off at this stage in her life? No, I don't. What I'd like is to make my mom feel loved and comfortable and appreciated and all that good stuff. So why would I drag this nonsense in?
All right. And you're going to be going to visit her next week, correct? That's why we're not going to have a show.
What is that music?
You don't recognize the song?
Old Lang Syne or something like that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Is it not appropriate? You're acting. It's not like I just put on,
But what are we playing it for? Are you telling me that we're done?
It's getting to that point.
Okay, you're the boss.
No, I'm not. I'm not cutting you off. I'm just putting some music in the background.
Are you trying to censor me, Jeff? Free speech. I thought this was
It's just,
You're trying to shut me
background.
It's your name, Elon Musk. You're trying to hand me?
Here, I'll lower the volume. It's just background music. How's that? Very low volume. So you're going to be visiting your parents next week?
I am. I'm going there the day after Christmas, and I'll hopefully be home in time for New Year's Eve.
Okay, and then we can play Auld Lang Syne again for you. It's also, this is the last episode of the year, so I thought it would be an appropriate song. People
You trying to get me to cry? I'm not going to cry.
I
You know what that's from? You know what movie that's from?
What?
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
There's no crying in baseball? That one?
No, it was Jerry Maguire. Cuban
okay.
Cuba Gooding's character was doing the interview. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
All
and then
right.
he cried. Yeah.
Well, Happy New Year. I love you. Thanks for working so hard. Thanks for being a great partner. Tori, thank you too, darling. I don't have the leather jacket on tonight, but I know how you feel.
Do you want me to leave, Jeff? I mean, I can. If I'm blunting your style, let me know, man.
I do want to thank everybody who helped us out this year. You know who you are. And I want to thank the audience. I want to thank Scott. I want to thank Tori. Happy holidays. We'll be back January 3rd. And I just found out we're not going to be back January 6th. It'll be January 5th. And Tori and I will be back on January 1st.
New Year edition. I like that.
Exactly. We should have you on as a guest sometime. Would you be willing, if I asked you nicely, to come on as a guest on that podcast?
Sure, Jeff. For you, anything.
Do it for Tori.
And I echo all of your thanks. I thank you. I thank Tori. I thank the ridiculous crew from the Telegram channel. I thank everybody. I mean, this has been an amazing ride. I don't know if we thought it was going to be like this when we started. I don't know what we thought was going to happen when we started, but this has morphed into something that.
Well, people should know this was your idea. This was not my idea. Scott told me that he liked the way Craig Ferguson answered viewer mail, and he said, "Let's do something like that." What?
We have a job for Ksenia.
We do,
because one of the key aspects of Craig Ferguson was randomly to have Secretariat run past. The Secretariat was two people dressed up in a horse costume. She likes to dress up as a unicorn, so we can get Ksenia to actually run back and forth as a unicorn when we say, "What time is it? Secretariat." And then we can play ridiculous. Okay, we don't want to do that. But
you're talking about a video or have her in person do this?
Well, she's from Canada, so I don't think she can do it in person. But
no. She's already traveled to Poughkeepsie, and she's saying she's probably going to travel to Texas too. So she can afford it. What the hell?
Remember, she has a husband named Dwight who has very big arms, very big neck, and he'll break you like a pretzel. So
I'm not hitting on her. I'm just saying.
No, that was for Ryan.
But, that was for Ryan. Ryan's married too. So
I know. It was a joke, Mrs. Ryan.
All right. Pat is her name. Is Noble, and she is noble. All right. So thanks, Tori. You want to come on and say anything at all since it's weepy time? Are you decent? Look at you. You are more than decent. You look fantastic. Get that microphone in place. Take your time. Look at that hair all swirly.
Didn't mean to lose it, but
yeah, me too.
The second, gotta get the tears out. Okay.
Group hug.
No, last time you got me hugging people on stage, Jeff, that was.
Oh yes, the gay Marine.
Yeah, gay Marine.
Happy New Year, Tori. Thanks for making this such a pleasurable experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Happy New Year, Tori.
Yeah, same here.
All right, is that it? Should we just end it now?
I think we should probably just pull the plug on it.
The song's been going on for a while.
Scott acted like it was a weird idea to play off that. I don't know.
I didn't understand you were cutting. So you were cutting me off. You were basically putting a marker on the table.
I was putting background music. We cut you off. We've been talking for 10 minutes since then.
This show is called Scott Ritter Extra. Let me break that down for you.
Auld Lang Syne is the extra.
Extra. Okay.
Right.
It's all
and
about
Auld Lang
me.
Syne is the extra part.
No, you're trying to cut me off. You're trying to make this about Jeff Norman. Why don't we just rename the show? Jeff Norman is in charge.
He can't even express love sincerely. He has to ruin it with jokes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jeff.
Oh. No, it's too late. It's too late. Group hug. Okay, here we go.
Group hug.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. Have a happy New Year. Have a Merry Christmas. And
and a happy Hanukkah. And don't hate the Jews.
Well, okay.